High school is often thought of as the golden years for some teenagers, where they spend time together and start romantic relationships. But not every student gets to experience that, especially someone like you, or this ugly dorky dude named Junichi. As the new semester begins, Junichi and his ugly, disgusting friends are clearly nervous because they still haven't gotten a girlfriend. Shinpei is totally losing it over being single since birth. Even though they're in their second year, he just can't figure out why his status hasn't changed. Junichi is in the same boat. He thought getting a girlfriend in high school would be easy, but let's just say his anaconda is still hibernating. Not long after, a girl named Nene shows up and delivers a homemade lunch to Junichi. His friends immediately protest, mad that Junichi never introduced them to a girl as cute as Nene. And if that wasn't enough, their classmate Yui suddenly approaches him too. Yui says she's happy to be in the same class with him again because they barely talked last year. She hopes they can be closer this time around, but because they've already resigned themselves to their low popularity, Shinpei and the gang decide to make things even worse by causing chaos in class. These ugly dudes blatantly start reading a magazine about melons and big mountains, disturbing everyone around them. Yukana, one of the girls in class, gets fed up and calls them out, saying their behavior is seriously disgusting just like their face. These ugly dudes is really roastable. You'd think being scolded by a cute girl would make them feel bad, right? Nope. Junichi and his 3 idiot friends are over the moon just because they got to interact with someone as pretty as her. Shinpei, flipping through his expert guidebook, confidently says that hot girls like Yukana are always easy to woo. So naturally, he suggests that one of them should go and confess their love to her. After debating it with Minoru and Keigo, they decide that Junichi will be the sacrificial lamb, the one to confess first. Junichi wasn't feeling confident at all about confessing, but since his buddies had already slipped a love note into Yukana's shoe locker, he had no choice but to face her. After school, Yukana found the note, and even though she had plans with her friends, she decided to meet Junichi behind the school. When it was time to confess, Junichi was a nervous wreck, with absolutely no idea what to say. Yukana asked him what he wanted, and poor Junichi just bowed his head and begged her to be his girlfriend. Yukana gave him a disgusted look, and Junichi immediately thought all hope was lost. But just as he was about to give up, he caught a glimpse of something, let's just say, fascinating. Of course, Yukana caught him looking, but instead of slapping him, she asked him what he liked about her. Since he didn't really know her, all he could say was that he liked her charming side, whatever that means. Yukana saw right through it, realizing Junichi was just captivated by her looks. She also noticed that Junichi had been sneaking peeks at her underwear, seriously dude, and told him that it was annoying, but strangely enough, she didn't seem to hate him for it. In fact, Yukana agreed to date Junichi because, according to her, he was kind of cute and easy to mess with. Junichi was still in shock, finding it hard to believe that his confession had worked. He couldn't shake the feeling that maybe Yukana just wanted to play with his anaconda. His heart. Or was I right the first time? The next day at school, Shinpei and the others apologized for forcing Junichi into confessing. They felt bad and assumed Junichi's high school life was officially ruined. But when Junichi told them Yukana had actually shown up and that his life was about to be wrecked in a whole new way, his friends felt sorry for him. They promised to support him no matter what, until Yukana sent Junichi a selfie, and then they ditched him faster than a bad prom date. Even though his friends weren't much help anymore, Shinpei still tried to be a bro, suggesting Junichi take Yukana to karaoke to move things to the next level. Shinpei claimed his job experience guaranteed it would work, never mind the fact that he's been single since birth. Junichi considered the advice, but he wasn't so sure. After all, Shinpei is literally the last person who should be giving relationship tips. Plus, it didn't help that Yukana wasn't exactly keeping their relationship a secret, which led to a million questions from their classmates and left Junichi with almost no time to actually talk to her. Ever since that day, Junichi found himself ghosted by his friends. After splitting up with them, Yukana quickly caught up to him and invited him to go somewhere. Poor Nene, who saw them walking together, looked all heartbroken. But Yukana didn't seem to care much. She had her mind set on one thing, getting Junichi to karaoke. Now, Junichi had always wanted to go to karaoke, but after Shinpei whispered something pervy in his ear about what might happen there, he was sweating bullets and couldn't handle being around his girlfriend. Meanwhile, Yukana was totally hyped to sing, especially since her last karaoke outing with friends fell through. As they entered the room, Junichi just stood there like a lost puppy. He didn't even know what song to sing. Then Yukana got closer to him, and naturally, Junichi's imagination went wild, thinking she was about to make some kind of move on him. But the moment Yukana started singing for real, Junichi snapped out of his daydream. As they sang together, Junichi finally started to relax, until Yukana took off her jacket. That was it. He couldn't hold back anymore, and decided to make a move, only for Yukana to completely ruin the moment by commenting on his nose hair? Ouch, that's brutal. But let's be real, it was just an excuse to dodge his awkward attempt at a kiss. Even though they were dating, Yukana clearly wasn't ready for that next step yet. The next day, Junichi found a letter in his shoe locker. It said someone was waiting for him behind the school. Shinpei and Keigo got all salty about it, wondering why Junichi kept getting all the breaks, but instead of sulking, they decided to hype him up this time. After all, maybe their good vibes would rub off on them too. When Junichi showed up behind the school, he was greeted by a tan-skinned girl holding something huge. This was not what Junichi expected. He figured some shy, cutesy girl would be the one to slip him a love note, but nope. He was faced with someone way more forward, and the pressure was getting to him. The situation only got worse when she started getting all up in his space. Just as Junichi was about to pass out from sheer panic, Yukana's voice echoed through the air as she called out his name. He freaked out, thinking she'd catch him cheating, as if he could even manage that. But, to his surprise, Yukana wasn't mad at all. The aggressive girl was none other than Ranko, Yukana's childhood friend, and she was a year older than both of them. After Yukana introduced them, Ranko acted all nice and friendly toward Junichi. That is, until they were walking together. That's when Ranko's mood flipped like a switch, and she made it clear she was going to ruin his relationship with Yukana. The day after that, Yukana invited Junichi to hang out with her and Ranko. Without thinking twice, he accepted the invitation, completely clueless that Ranko had some not-so-friendly plans to break him up with his girlfriend. Their first stop was the mall. Yukana wanted to shop for some cute outfits and show them off to Junichi. When she asked for his opinion, he said he liked the outfit on the left. Yukana, however, was unsure because Ranko's taste in clothes was totally different from hers. After that, Yukana and Ranko tried on more outfits, asking Junichi for his thoughts on everything. But since they all looked good to him, he struggled to pick. Eventually, after trying on a ton of clothes, they decided not to buy anything and walked out of the store with nothing but wasted time. Classic. On their way home, two guys tried to hit on Yukana. As her boyfriend, Junichi stepped up to defend her. Too bad his body was built more like a noodle than a tank. He didn't stand a chance. Luckily, Ranko handled the situation, pretending to go along with the guys' advances before attacking them when they least expected it. Seriously, she handled them faster than Junichi could handle a sneeze. A bit later, Ranko showed up at Junichi's house. She said that his attempt to protect Yukana earlier was cool, though we all know that's a stretch, and wanted to talk about it inside. But once they were inside, Ranko started teasing him and telling him to break up with Yukana. Despite her, assets, Junichi decided to stay loyal to Yukana. This ticked Ranko off, and she finally spilled the beans. Turns out she's in love with Junichi too, but she couldn't say anything because she didn't want to ruin their friendship. Meanwhile, there's Yui, who's always been praised for her smarts and beauty, which made her super arrogant. She started treating people like her personal servants. One day, Junichi was doing some research on Gyaru girls and he stumbled upon a live stream from a girl named Boa. Every time she streamed, she kept her audience entertained, but she also had a habit of gossiping and roasting anyone she didn't like. The next day, Junichi and his friends were obsessing over Boa. They were captivated by her Gyaru charm, but she also had this elegance like a princess or something. Shinpei, though, squints his eyes and starts feeling like he's seen her somewhere before. Meanwhile, Minoru couldn't care less about the conversation because he's more into some cute little girl he saw. Someone, call the FBI, now! Later, While Junichi was having lunch with Yukana, Yui suddenly shows up wanting to talk to him about something. But before she could say anything, Ranko stepped in and basically gave her the "move along, lady" treatment. Yui backed off, but she clearly wasn't done and planned to talk to him later. Ranko got all emotional, but Junichi immediately reassured her that there was absolutely nothing going on with Yui. He was trying to keep the peace. After school, Yukana tells Junichi she's going to hang out with a friend, and Yui, seizing her moment, drags Junichi to a cafe instead of, talking to him at school like a normal person. Turns out, Yui just wanted to find out if Junichi and Yukana were really dating. She says Junichi isn't a good match for Yukana and insists that a more mature woman would be better for him. Junichi, in a rare moment of backbone, tries to convince her otherwise by listing all of Yukana's good qualities. Meanwhile, Shinpei has been glued to Boa's live streams. He finally connects the dots and realizes that Boa and Yui share more than just a passing resemblance. Sure, Boa looks a bit different, but Shinpei is convinced they're the same person based on the way Boa complains about her school life. With this breakthrough, Shinpei starts gathering evidence. Yui's newfound obsession with Junichi leads her to drag him up to the school roof where she confesses her feelings. She's like, "Every time I think about you, I can't stand it anymore." Junichi, despite being flattered by Yui's confession, decides to reject her because, well, he's shockingly loyal to Yukana. This of course makes Yui furious, and she threatens to show Yukana some incriminating photos unless Junichi complies. Thankfully, Ranko and the squad show up just in time to shut Yui down, revealing her secret online identity as Boa. The next morning, Junichi wakes up to find a Gyaru girl in his room. He's confused. Who is this girl? And why does she sound like she's trying to impersonate a cartoon character? Turns out it's Nini, and she's trying out her new Gyaru look. She insists on walking with him to school, holding his hand the whole time, which makes him sweat bullets thinking Yukana might see. Once they arrive at school, Minoru, thinking Nene is some kind of elementary schooler, practically charges at her like a dog in heat. But when she reveals she's only a year younger than Junichi, Minoru loses all interest because apparently, girls his age are too mature for him. What a weirdo. Shinpei and Keigo, meanwhile, just glare at Junichi with envy, like always. As they enter the school, Yui greets Junichi calmly, like nothing had happened. But the moment Nini gets close to him, Yui's calm facade starts cracking, and she looks like she's about to explode. Thankfully, someone calls for Yui, and the potential catfight is avoided. This time, poor Junichi is left confused by all the drama swirling around him. To make it up to him, Yukana promises to take him somewhere fun later, which somehow makes everything better. Watching from the sidelines, Shinpei and the boys look on with that familiar mix of sadness and jealousy, wondering why the universe is so unfair. During lunch, Ranko deliberately tried to interrupt Junichi so he couldn't get cozy with Yukana. But just when Ranko thought she had the upper hand, another Gyaru girl suddenly approached Junichi, acting all chummy with him. This left Yukana and Ranko wondering who this half-hearted Gyaru girl was. Trying to keep the peace, Junichi attempted to explain the situation, but before he could, Yukana quickly realized that the girl was actually Nene, Junichi's childhood friend. Nene, of course, denied all accusations of being his little sister. Meanwhile, Yukana treated Nene kindly because, let's be honest, she was pretty adorable. But Nene, being the little firecracker she is, accused Yukana of only dating Junichi as a backup plan. As someone who knew Junichi better than anyone, Nene couldn't believe that anyone would genuinely want to date him. I mean, Junichi's not exactly Mr. Popular. But Yukana wasn't having it, saying that just because Junichi isn't popular doesn't mean he can't have a girlfriend. She insisted that Junichi has many good qualities that make him stand out from the crowd. After hearing all this, Nene grudgingly backed down. Later that night, Nene sneaked into Junichi's room, hugging him tightly. She asked Junichi to teach her how to become a mature woman. Now, you can imagine Junichi's brain short-circuiting at this point, but since Nene was like a little sister to him, Junichi decided not to touch her at all. He didn't want to take advantage of Nene's feelings for him just to satisfy his anaconda. That comment made Nene burst into tears because she had liked him for a long time. The next day in class, Junichi was still preoccupied with what had happened the night before. As Yukana tried to cheer him up, Nene suddenly appeared and separated them, clearly not ready to give up on stealing Junichi away. On a different day, Shinpei asked Junichi about the progress in his relationship with Yukana. Since there hadn't been much, Shinpei suggested what every true friend would. They needed to play a game of King's Game. Shinpei and the others were willing to rig the game in Junichi's favor, but the catch was that Junichi had to invite Yukana and her friends over to her house. Junichi knew what he needed to do, but wasn't sure how to ask Yukana. Fortunately, Yukana was talking about summer break at that moment, so Junichi asked if they could all go to her house to discuss summer plans. Yukana took the idea seriously, but when she found out Junichi also wanted to invite their friends, she got mad, thinking it was just going to be the two of them. Even so, she still allowed everyone to come over. While waiting for Yukana at the school gate, Yui suddenly approached Junichi to ask about his plans after school. When she found out that Junichi and the others were going to Yukana's house, Yui mentioned she was free and hinted at wanting to be invited. Not wanting to be rude, Junichi had no choice but to invite her too. A little while later, Junichi arrived at Yukana's house. Seeing Yukana in casual clothes left him completely mesmerized, unable to tear his eyes away. To make matters worse, Yukana started teasing him, making him even more curious. Before long, Ranko and the others arrived at Yukana's house. Seeing Junichi and Yukana together, they began to wonder what they were up to. In that situation, Junichi could only stay silent with a smile, while Yukana defended herself, saying she was just teasing him a little. A few moments later, Shinpei and the others started showing up, shocking everyone with their overly flashy outfits. Once everyone was gathered, Shinpei suggested they play King's Game. Since Yukana had never played before, she was interested in trying it out, while Yui looked very cautious, fearing they might make her do something naughty. The others agreed to play, hoping to use the game's punishments to their advantage. Seeing the looks on his friends' faces, Junichi immediately suspected they were up to something. But when Keigo became king, his command was pretty harmless, asking Ranko to slap Junichi. Since nothing seemed suspicious, they continued playing King's Game. They were having so much fun that they didn't realize Shinpei and Keigo were planning something against them. When Junichi asked what they were up to, Shinpei revealed that in the next round, they would have to kiss. By marking his stick, Shinpei could control when he would become king and order the other players to do whatever he wanted. Junichi wasn't on board with the idea, so he decided to switch out his stick to make sure Yukana and the other girls wouldn't be the ones forced into it. When they all gathered at Yukana's house, they decided to go to the beach together during the summer break. But to make this trip happen, they needed to earn some cash first. Lucky for them, Shinpei knew about some part-time jobs that suited everyone. Being the hardcore otakus they are, Shinpei and Keigo took jobs at an anime store. Minoru signed up to work at a children's amusement park, and Junichi, bless his heart, ended up as kitchen staff at a cosplay cafe. On the first day of summer break, they all started their jobs. It didn't take long for Shinpei and Keigo to get overwhelmed because they were immediately assigned to busy, high-traffic areas. Meanwhile, Minoru seemed to be enjoying his job a little too much, which had his friends worried he might catch the attention of the FBI. When Junichi started his job, he was shocked to find Yukana and the other girls working at the same cafe as waitresses and cosplayers. Apparently, they had started working there earlier. Before long, the manager showed up, and his presence made Yukana and the others uncomfortable because he couldn't stop staring at their costumes. Lucky for them, Junichi was there to be the human shield. When the cafe finally opened, customers started pouring in, and the waitresses began serving them, playing their cosplay roles to the hilt. Even though there were some unexpected problems, they handled them with enthusiasm. But on the last day of work, the manager announced a special event where the waitresses had to read novels out loud to the customers. The catch? These were adult novels, totally inappropriate for high school students like them. Yui was at her breaking point and did something to get the event canceled. While she was protesting, Nene and Ranko, because of course they did, started reading the book aloud to see Junichi's reaction. Junichi, being the noble and slightly panicked guy he is, tried to stop them, but then Yukana joined in, turning beet red with embarrassment. Just then, the manager walked over and asked what all the fuss was about. Without a shred of guilt, he told them to pick a book since he went through so much trouble finding them to make the customers happy. Junichi wasn't having any of it and protested the event, but the manager was stubborn and insisted on going ahead with it, even against his staff's objections. Thankfully, Yui reported the situation to the cafe owner, and the event was eventually canceled because the owner didn't approve it. Plus, Yui made sure everyone still got paid what they were promised. Later that evening, Junichi and Yukana had a moment alone. Yukana mentioned how relieved she was that the event didn't happen. Looking at Junichi, she also said she wanted to try doing things with just the two of them from now on. "Hey Junichi, don't mess this up." After earning money from their part-time jobs, Junichi and his friends finally made their beach trip dream come true. Keigo couldn't believe he was actually going to a place where popular people hang out. He was practically living a dream, or at least that's what he told himself. However, their excitement didn't last long. Despite the beautiful scenery, they couldn't do much because they had to guard their stuff. Junichi, on the other hand, seemed to be having the time of his life. From the moment they arrived, Junichi was constantly accompanied by Yukana and surrounded by her friends. But Ranko, ever the troublemaker, kept messing with him, deliberately throwing a ball at his face hard enough to knock him off his feet. Yukana was really worried about him, but Ranko quickly distracted her by suggesting they check out some shops for dinner later. While Ranko and Yukana went looking for food, Yui said she wanted to rest for a bit, but she couldn't leave Nini and Junichi alone together, so she had to tag along. A little while later, Junichi approached Yukana because some guys were talking to her. But just as he was about to intervene, he hesitated, thinking he had no right to stop Yukana from talking to other guys. Still, it turned out that approaching them was the right move, as Yukana and Ranko used his arrival to shift the attention away from the guys who were hitting on them. When the girls returned, Shinpei and Keigo were all pumped up, but the second Ranko and Yukana offered to take over guarding the stuff. Their excitement deflated faster than a popped balloon. To cope with their disappointment, Shinpei and Keigo started scheming something for later that night. But to pull off their plan, they had to convince Junichi to join in and back them up. As Yukana and the girls headed to the bathhouse, Shinpei and Keigo geared up to execute their sneaky peeking plan. Junichi, the voice of reason, or maybe just the only one with a shred of common sense, tried to warn them not to do it. But Shinpei, determined as ever, pressed on with the plan. In the end, Junichi had no choice but to tag along, though he secretly intended to sabotage their pervy mission. Meanwhile, the girls were in the bathhouse, completely unconcerned about being spied on because the inn had top-notch security, especially for the women's bath. At the same time, Shinpei and his buddies were trudging through the forest. When Junichi found a trap, he deliberately triggered the alarm to cancel their plan. But it was a fake trap set up by Shinpei, who had expected Junichi to betray them after their past experiences. After getting caught red-handed, Junichi tried to make a run for it, but when Shinpei and Keigo chased him, Junichi ended up falling off a steep cliff. With Junichi out of the picture, Shinpei and Keigo thought nothing could stop them now. But as they approached the women's bath, they were immediately hit by all sorts of traps set by the inn's owner. After returning from the beach, Yukana ran into her old middle school friend, Dai. They seemed really close, which made Junichi feel lonely and unnecessary. During this reunion, Dai invited Yukana to join their middle school friends for a meal. Yukana quickly accepted because she missed her old pals. When Dai asked about the person behind her, Yukana proudly introduced Junichi as her boyfriend, while Junichi tried his best not to look like the human version of an undercooked noodle. Seeing Yukana and Dai's close interaction made Junichi suspicious that something was going on between them. Yukana tried to explain the misunderstanding, but when Junichi started belittling himself, Yukana suddenly got mad and didn't want to continue the conversation. Since then, Junichi often found himself silent and lost in thought. Even though he had just returned from a vacation, he was anything but cheerful, unlike his friends. When Junichi talked about the situation with his friends, Shinpei referred to it as an NTR situation, suspecting that Dai might have beaten Junichi to the punch. Junichi, clueless about what Shinpei meant, thought he shouldn't have asked for advice in the first place. When Yukana came to class, Junichi wanted to talk to her again, but he didn't get the chance because she completely ignored him. Despite the rejection, Junichi didn't give up. He tried approaching her again after school and asked her to walk home together, but Yukana flat out refused. saying she was going to meet her middle school friends. To cheer up the dejected Junichi, Shinpei and the others took him to karaoke. Shinpei also advised him to apologize to Yukana, even if he wasn't at fault, suggesting that it might be the key to melting her heart again. After giving the advice, they sang together until Junichi's spirits were lifted. But shortly after leaving the karaoke spot, they saw Yukana chatting alone with Dai, which made Junichi jump to the conclusion that Yukana was just playing him. The next day, Yukana approached Junichi, acting like her usual self. She told him that she had been cold to him the day before because she wanted him to feel guilty about what happened. Junichi, clueless as ever, couldn't understand what he had done wrong, especially since Yukana seemed so happy hanging out with Dai. Yukana explained that after the meal with her middle school friends, Dai had only asked her for advice, but Junichi still didn't want to believe it and accused Yukana of cheating. A little later, Yui asked about the situation between them, and when Junichi said Yukana was just messing with him to hurt him, Yui got really mad, accusing Junichi of only thinking about himself. She made it clear that Junichi should be more concerned about Yukana's feelings than his own. The next day, Yukana gathered her friends to talk about her problems with Junichi, but when she tried to discuss it, she couldn't hold back her tears. Seeing Yukana cry made Ranko so furious that she stormed off to confront Junichi. When Ranko got in his face, Junichi admitted he had been selfish. But after realizing his mistake, he promised to go see Yukana and swore he wouldn't let anyone else take her away from him. A little late for the heroics, Junichi, but better than never, I guess. Not long after that, Dai and his gang showed up at the same cafe where Junichi was. During their conversation, Dai bragged about meeting Yukana and even mentioned his plan to steal her away from her boyfriend. As if that wasn't sleazy enough, Dai then suggested that if he ever got bored with Yukana, he'd just pass her off to his friends like she was some kind of cheap prize. Junichi, unable to stay quiet, immediately confronted Dai, demanding he take back his disgusting words about Yukana. Dai, seeing this as a challenge, ordered his friends to drag Junichi outside. Surrounded by thugs, Junichi didn't back down. He couldn't fight to save his life, but he managed to corner Dai by biting his leg. Yeah, he went full toddler mode, whatever works. Dai screamed in pain, begging Junichi to let go, but Junichi wouldn't release him until Dai promised to stay away from Yukana. However, Junichi was outnumbered and couldn't hold on for much longer. Eventually, he got beaten up by Dai and his gang. Thankfully, because of he is the MC, so Ranko showed up just in time to help. Unlike Junichi, Ranko could take down those thugs one by one. Shinpei, Keigo, and Minoru also joined in to defend Junichi, and with their help, Junichi was able to leave the scene and go find Yukana. But despite calling her multiple times, Yukana wouldn't answer. In the end, Junichi sent her a message saying he would wait for her behind the school. Meanwhile, as Ranko and the others finished off Dai's gang, Dai pretended to surrender, hoping to get some pity from them. Just as Ranko was about to teach Dai a lesson, a little kid approached them and asked what they were doing. Dai used the distraction to make a run for it, but ended up bumping into the kid, knocking her down and making her cry. Minoru quickly rushed to help the child, but he was also seething with anger at Dai's actions. With Dai now cornered, Ranko was able to give him the punishment he deserved. Back at the school, Junichi was still waiting for Yukana. When she finally arrived, Junichi bowed his head and asked her to date him again, just like he had done before. With his head still bowed, Junichi confessed that he didn't have feelings for her at first, but now he really liked her and couldn't imagine his life without her. Yukana asked what made Junichi like her, and he sincerely explained all the things he loved about her. In the end, Yukana believed that Junichi truly cared for her and told him to stand up, saying his feelings had already been conveyed. However, Yukana also made it clear that Junichi shouldn't confess his love again since they were already officially dating. Yeah, buddy, you're past the tryouts. Now it's time to play the game. After that, Yukana invited him to go somewhere special. She decided to visit the amusement park at night, just like Junichi had wanted before. Although it was a short visit, the moments they shared that evening brought them closer and helped them understand each other better. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and like to support this channel. Love you guys.